Welcome to our podcast, Chat with Junko and Bola. My name is Ojo-Yoshida, Editor-in-Chief of the Ojo-Yoshida Report. In each episode, we invite a subject matter expert for conversation. We ask probing questions to provide our listeners insight and clarity on the news of the moment.
AI is new. There's a lot of things that are changing. There's a lot of things customers want. And one of the things that happens is the big incumbents are tied, they're handcuffed to their past investments, their financial situation, their staffing, their customer roadmaps, and everything. They can't pivot, they can't change, where startups can do so.
So this is a chat with Junko and Bola. We actually have an interesting guest, the news of the week, or sometimes news of the month, to discuss what's going on in the latest and greatest. And in this case, we have Keith Witek. He is a CEO and board member of Tenstorrent. The reason why I picked Keith, not because I bumped into him in Santa Clara recently, but also we were both in the midst of AI fever in the Silicon Valley. So I thought it would be a good opportunity and get the industry perspective. I think Keith has a very broader view of not just on chip industry, but also system companies. As I understand that, Keith, you used to work for just prior to joining Tenstorrent, you worked at both Google and Tesla, right?
Tesla, correct. Yes.
So first, tell us about your background and tell me about your experience at what you had to do to bring Tesla and Google along into this journey of semiconductor advancements and development.
That's a great question. So my background is I started off, have a degree in electrical engineering and computer science from Madison. I did work in manufacturing, did work in designing chips, tests, operations, and then went back to law school in my early days while I was at Motorola. I practiced law for a while, Wilson Sonsini and other places, and then I transitioned into business roles for the rest of my career up until today. So I've seen engineering, business, legal, and a lot of dimensions of the business. So what I do, I call business engineering, and I taught a course at the University of Texas a while back on this, which is if you bring all these disciplines together and you either build business from scratch or refine business as it exists today to operate better, to be more resilient, to be forward-looking, so when disruptions come, you aren't surprised. Disruptions become competitive advantages if you're prepared for them and you're operating in conjunction with what you're seeing, and they become risks and liabilities if you don't see them. So what I was doing at Tesla and Google was getting technology development channels, especially semiconductors, in place so they could compete better than their competitors and provide better products.
Helping to disrupt the market and managing the disruption.
Yeah, like Tesla disrupting the market. One of the things that I learned from working for Elon was never try to win in business reasoning from the status quo. Start from a blank sheet of paper, start with first principles, understand what the customers want, and then build the most optimal thing, the most optimal plan you can to give the customer what they want. And that's why SpaceX didn't compete with NASA. SpaceX didn't compete with the Russian space agency. Tesla wasn't trying to beat Ford or General Motors or Toyota or VW. They were trying to give the customers what they wanted in a way that you couldn't get there from where the incumbents were. So he built new companies in a new market, and he's doing it in other segments with, Boring and Neuralink, and maybe someday we can clone him and put him on American healthcare. That would be a good thing.
That would be the day, yes.
Yeah, that needs some fixing.
Yeah. No, that you raised an interesting question, though. Well, I thought the Tesla always has an edge because everything is green field. But at the same time, what you're saying is that you should use it as that's sort of the basis of how you get into the new market. Don't build your business based on what you already have. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I think most people are saying, well, hey, if you want to enter in a market, look at the guys that are really winning and go tap into their supply chain and go innovate the way they're innovating and hire the same people and look at the market the same way. And that just means you're going to do the same thing they're doing 3 years behind what they're doing. So, and you've seen it play out throughout history. We saw what happened to Dell with Sun and IBM. We saw what happened to Motorola with Nokia and then Nokia to Apple. The way to win is those leaders looked at the market differently and were courageous enough to not try to copy what everybody else was doing, but be open-minded, listen to customers, look at the market, and do something very different that was needed in the market that the incumbents just couldn't even see from their vantage point.
All right. That brings me, that leads to my next question is that if so, how does that experience at Tesla and Google translate into what you guys are doing at Tenstorrent today?
Yeah, so at Tenstorrent today, we're doing basically the same thing. Listening to customers, what is it that they want? What skills can we bring to bear and what technology can we develop and what business models can we put in place to get them there? And how do we do that as quickly, as efficiently as possible? And so everybody asks, well, how are you competing with the big guys in AI? Well, you don't necessarily have to. AI is new. There's a lot of things that are changing. There's a lot of things customers want. And one of the things that happens is the big incumbents are tied, they're handcuffed to their past investments, their financial situation, their staffing, their customer roadmaps, and everything. They can't pivot, they can't change where startups can do so. A great example was I was sitting and talking with a senior executive at ARM about a decade ago. And ARM is a very successful company. Back then, they were at 96% gross margin. They were running a 40% operating income business. And they were talking about what different things they could do to expand their business. And these executives said, Keith, anything we do creates risk, craters our margin, increases our OPEX, increases our CAPEX. So they're handcuffed to their business. They're handcuffed now to their stock price. They're handcuffed, like in Nvidia's case, to their investment in graphics and CUDA. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You make money with what you have. But just like we've seen in all the markets I just talked about earlier, sometimes you need something new to go to the next level. And the guy who's making money off of the level they're at today, it's very difficult for them to cannibalize themselves and go to that place.
Specifically, how are you doing that at Tenstorrent? Are you doing something different in the AI space at Tenstorrent?
Okay, yeah, I'll talk about that. So one of the things that there's several things you have to do in AI, I think, to win, to go forward. And I'll just lay them out very quickly. One is you need heterogeneous compute. There's fundamentally three different types of compute engines out there today. There's CPUs, single thread performance matters, very high speed, a lot of branches and jumps and changes in the flow of execution. Then there's highly parallel 2D graphics type processors. And then there's tensor processors or graph computers that are multi-dimensional that execute AI algorithms of today and of the future a lot better. So the first thing you have to do is realize that compute in many ways and in many applications needs all three of those engines. And so that's why we're bringing RISC-V to market for the CPU. With graphics, we feel like the Tensor engine can do what graphics does today, only better, and serve the needs of AI better. But you need to at least put those two engines together to make things work. And then there's other engines and other systems. There's digital signal processors and other things that are out there that may not need to be coupled so tightly together into our architecture. But it's no longer the case where one engine services all your needs. And what I tell people who don't know technology really well, it's like transportation. Sometimes you need a bike. Sometimes you need a car. Sometimes you need a moving van. Sometimes you need an airplane. If you only have one of those, A boat is useful in some circumstances, but completely worthless in others. And we're seeing that in compute. So the first thing is we're putting the right compute in place with the right architecture, memory subsystem, fabric that enables and lights up those engines to do the work optimally for the user. Then we're bringing to market different business models. There's companies out there that want to get access to the early IP and build it themselves. I mean, Google would be a great example of that, right? They'd happily license technology in and use their very powerful, very capable G chips development team to go make their own chips and their own platforms. That's what they want to do. And it's not in Nvidia or AMD or Intel's best interest to go do that, right? It would be bad for their business model. And then what we do is provide chips, SoCs, and boards and platforms that allow customers who don't want to get into the details of making silicon like Apple has successfully done and like Microsoft and Google are doing, like many Chinese companies are doing right now. If they don't want to do that, they can buy chips from us, chiplets to assemble those very flexibly and get to market faster, boards and cards. So our business model is provide end-to-end solutions, software running on the hardware, and then deliver it to customers the way they want to consume it. And for us, we can make plenty of money to be successful doing that, whereas other companies are handcuffed to their financial model. It's hard to make 85% gross margin and have the kind of revenue Nvidia and other large companies do if you do backpedal into a licensing business. So they're handcuffed by their past success, and that's where there's opportunity for people to disrupt and do different things with customers, quite frankly.
Yeah, so that kind of explains what I call Tenstorrent's kitchen sink strategy. That's oftentimes kitchen sink strategy doesn't really translate well. But what I noticed that the Tenstorrent as a startup actually is pursuing a lot of different paths. So you go after not just training market, but also inference market. You sell AI chips, but you also license IPs, right? And you do RISC-V, and you also do chiplets. So this is like you can go like 5 different ways. Is that your strategy I should understand?
It is, and it wasn't the grand master strategy when we started in 2016. It's something that, again, using the lessons that we learned at places like Tesla, it's listen to your customers, watch the market, watch the trends. How do you do the best product for the best times today? And then look forward and say, where are we going to be in 5 and 10 years? And make sure you're proactively designing product that's going to be successful in that period of time. And so when our founders found the company, the whole goal was build great boxes that go into data center and hyperscalers. And they would have been very happy buying chips from somebody else and building great boxes. And then they realized the chips that are out there, they aren't going to be sold to them to build boxes, or they're not capable of running the workloads or the use cases that are existing today and are going to be created tomorrow. So they said, okay, we need to start building chips. And Jim Keller, who was the first angel investor in Tenstorrent, decided to leave Intel, come into the company and help them do that because it was an expanded scope. And we pulled that together, and then we said, okay, let's start building chips. Okay, well, can we get the architecture we need from ARM or x86 and get it licensed for CPU? And then is there AI we can license out there to put together the chips we need to make customers happy? And the answer was no. There isn't any AI that's performant that you can license, at least not at the time. And you can't get the changes to the ARM architecture or the x86 architecture in the right form to make it work well. And that was a barrier I ran into at both Google and Tesla. So we said, okay, we got to make IP too. And we started building AI engines, and we started building the software stack on top of it. And so, again, to make the product that made customers happy and that won, given the algorithms and the use cases we're seeing today and tomorrow, we couldn't build from the status quo that was off the shelf. And then we said, okay, since we're building this, we might as well monetize all of it. So, right? Unlike companies that are just IP companies don't want to see you get self-sufficient on their IP where you don't need them anymore. Apple doesn't really need ARM much anymore because Apple is building better CPUs, many people believe, than ARM at this point. And I think that's dangerous for an IP business model. So you don't want to have your customers be independent from you. If you're selling boxes at high margin and high dollar, you don't want to have that technology be readily accessed in open ecosystems. So a customer who's very capable, like an Apple or a Microsoft or a Google or a Facebook, can go make that cheaper, better, cut out the middleman margin and go into business. We can do these things because it's part of our business model to build this up from scratch. That, look, we're going to make money on boxes and chips and chiplets. We feel we can build that better than anybody else out there. So if we can enable you with IP and license that to you where you can own and control that and have safety and security and sovereignty in your, geo space that you're in, be it India, Japan, someplace else, and you can build a rich ecosystem around AI and RISC-V, drive down costs, drive up quality, drive up choice, drive more innovation, that's just going to make Tenstorrent more successful.
That's really fascinating, actually, that how do your potential investors are viewing your strategy? Do they think that it makes sense, or are you guys actually pulled into too many different directions? What are they saying to you?
A lot of the people who don't really know the business as well as people who've worked in this business for 30, 40 years, they'll say, well, are you doing too much? And the answer is no, we're doing exactly what is needed to win in the market. And when you look at the companies like, even ARM, Intel, Qualcomm, Broadcom, then you look at the board and the box makers, and they do what they need to do to create the right product to service their customer base. And the truth of the matter is, I'll just pick like Qualcomm as an example. They buy Nuvia because they need to develop IP. I sold them their Adreno graphics technology when I worked at AMD. So, Adreno is an anagram of Radeon. I don't know if most people know that, but
Oh.
so they bought some of our low-end Radeon technology we got from ATI, and they built, Adreno. So they are developing IP. Then they develop chips, and if they're selling into cell phones and cars, they have to build those systems as well, at least in prototype stage, so they know what their customer is dealing with. We're doing the same thing, and we're just choosing to monetize all of it because we can, and because customers want that, and we can attack a larger TAM if we do so. So I don't think we're doing too much. I think we're doing what every company needs to do to be successful in this space. And yeah, that's what you have to do to win.
All right. I would like to switch gears a little bit that I want to talk about the chiplets. Of course, chiplets are all the rage and everybody's talking about it, especially in the automotive industry, whether they can do it or not. I mean, people pay lip services to how the chiplets can decompose what used to be the system on chip, which is getting increasingly expensive to make. So, why are you in chiplets from the Tenstorrent point of view, or Tenstorrent's customers' point of view? Why they want you to be in chiplet business?
Yeah, I think chiplets, I think, will wind up being one of those things like Foundry or like IP licensing. Once it comes to market and we go through that crossroads and down a different path, we're going to look back and say, from that day forward, the market was never the same again. And it changed everything. And it changed winners and losers in the market. And it opened up new players to enter the market and play in technology that couldn't play before. So the chiplet journey is not new. In my journey, the way I see chiplet, and it wasn't always called chiplets, it was called multi-chip modules and other things,
Right.
is the FPGA guys, I think, hit the brick wall first, is they needed more gates on a chip than the 800, 850, millimeter squared reticle field that they had in the lithography tools. So they started very early on. This is probably what I'm remembering is maybe 20 years ago, starting to break up their design into pieces and then put it together in more complicated packages. Then DRAM came along and they said, we need to put more memory into smaller form factors so it can go into phones and watches and other things. And they adopted, through silicon vias and 3D stacked technology that was multi-chip. And then the journey, and then the brick wall was hit by the server graphics guys, the AMDs, the Nvidias, and the Intels. And AMD had a different issue. They had to, at the time, compete with 5 or so different engineering teams at Intel that were designing specifically for 5 different markets, like laptop and desktop and server and other things. And they said, we don't have the people. How do we do a single design that's scalable and then attack tablet, desktop, notebook, data center, and do it efficiently? And some super smart people there, starting in 2008 while I was there, uh, developed a strategy. By 2015, we came to market with Fiji, the first part. It was rough, but the company had courage and their leadership stayed the course. And with Zen and Zeppelin coming out and the products they have today, Rome, Ryzen, their chiplet approach is, I think, one of the 3 reasons why AMD stock went from a buck 88 to like $175 where it is today. That was really a very, very ingenious strategy to put in place to allow them to punch very much above their weight. And now you fast forward to today, and the interposer testing, known good die research that a lot of smart people are doing is getting to the point where chiplets can move into a lot of markets. You have people in mobile, guys like Qualcomm and Google and others talking about it. And I think if an ecosystem can form that isn't proprietary, Apple has a chiplet proprietary platform, AMD has theirs. If this moves out into the light of day, where every company can make a chiplet and plug into common interfaces, common thermals, common test infrastructure, common security platforms, it's going to allow people who aren't in the tech business today to assemble powerful solutions and take them to market in 6 months. And I was even talking with a guy at Walmart. He said he was a CTO at Walmart. I didn't know Walmart had a CTO, right? And they said they use a lot of silicon to track their operations, logistics, and inventory, and they're not always happy with the solutions they get. They wish they could get something different. Well, if they can get the right Legos in an open standard and hire a few smart people, and not a lot, like a handful of people, a dozen, a Walmart company could be making their own silicon solutions. A Pfizer could be making their own medical silicon solutions. This is going to be a very, very different future if what we think can happen actually does happen over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, tell me about that if, because from what I understand, that's the picture you painted is a very idealistic. The problem is that we may not have the open chiplet market for a long time, really.
Yeah, and this is why I love working in strategy, because I can put it down on PowerPoint and make it somebody else's problem. So there are thousands and thousands of people that are going to have to get involved with this and do research and write thesis papers and try and fail. There's going to have to be a big sandbox to make this work. The things that are going to block this from happening, or slow it at least, will be the standards. We see this all over in the industry, right? There's a painful process you have to go through to get to almost any standard that we've ever seen in the tech industry. And then you have to have the support from people to make that happen. And I guarantee you, there will be winners and losers in this. There's some companies that are big incumbents today where if the chiplet market we just discussed happens, their TAM is at risk of going to 30% of what it is today. And they're not going to like that, right?
It's a question about the sovereignty issue, which I think it was very naive of me. But when I was talking to somebody from Taiwan during CES, he was saying that the national governments all over the world are worried about not just the supply chain issue, but also they're worried about AI. It's AI speaks directly to the sovereignty of the government of that nation. So that really did not stick with me until that moment, and then I realized that that's why like companies like Tenstorrent, even though it's a startup, I mean, you guys are actually really picking up sort of national flag carriers of the new chip companies like Rapidus in Japan, or the if it is a case of Korea, Hyundai and Samsung. You picking up those big guns as your customers. Where does that the sovereignty issue comes in? Can you explain?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think first off, we're facing a lot of new trends or disruptions in the market that nobody who's been in this business for even 40, 50 years has seen before. We're seeing that there's a big debate about around Moore's law. It's some people say it's dead, some people say it's. I don't think anybody in their right mind can say Moore's law is anywhere near what it was 10 years ago. So Moore's law is slowing. Cost of keeping on the bleeding edge nodes is going through the roof, right? So costs are getting exponentially high. Disruption is coming faster than it has ever come before. You can't rest on your laurels for even 6 months and hope to like milk a product or raise your margins without somebody else coming in and disrupting what you're doing. All this is fairly new and accelerating in our market. So when you see that happening, it's no longer possible. When you see companies like TSMC and Microsoft and Google complaining about the cost of doing business and the capex and COGS, wow. You know, a $2 trillion market cap company, $2 trillion market cap company saying this is too expensive, right? Well, something has to change. And what's happening is governments now have to get involved. You see it all over. You know, India, I was on stage in India with NXP and Qualcomm announcing their 12 billion, 14 billion investment like the CHIPS Act. Japan is doing the same. US is doing the same. Europe is doing it. China has been on this path for a long time. Now, what's forcing them down this path? A couple things. It's one of the things is what we just discussed.
Yes.
The other thing is there's a huge geopolitical rift happening between East and West. And I understand that as an American. I understand the risks. I understand the national security issues, and we're going to support that 110%. But what it's going to do is fracture the supply chain. It's going to increase cost. It's going to destroy a little bit of the globalization that we've built over the last 40, 50 years that comes at a cost. And so what these other countries are looking at is they're saying, well, how do I get torn apart in this fight, right? And how do I get affected? I have to watch out for my own corporations, my own citizenry, my own GDP. So they're saying, okay, I need access to this technology because if China gets angry with me or Europe gets angry with me for not doing what I need to do in this global political battle, I, Japan, or I, India, or I, you know, United Arab Emirates or Israel could have my technology cut off in a flick of a pen from a politician somewhere, right? So they're saying, I need to work more with open standards. I need to have possession and control of that technology. Not only do I need to differentiate it and own it in many ways to win in the marketplace, I need to have that sovereignty and security that somebody else isn't going to mess with me when I build out a telecom system or a data center or a healthcare system. And somebody says, well, I'm sorry, you're not going to get access to X-ray machines and you know, CRT scanners, and I'm not going to give you 6G technology anymore. And then on top of that, what these companies and countries are worried about is the entire semiconductor supply chain, because scale often wins in the end, is being reduced to monopoly and duopoly control points, right? There's one.
It's already happening.
It's already happened, and it's continuing to happen, and it will continue. You have one company in the Netherlands, ASML, supplying lithography tools. You have two companies doing CAD tools, Synopsys and Cadence. Everybody else is kind of out of the race. You have only two companies doing advanced nodes, Samsung and TSMC for fab. You've really only got three Western accessed companies doing 5G modems. ARM has got a complete lock on CPUs for mobile handsets. I could go on and on, right? And so they're saying, these countries are saying, we need open innovation and we need choice, because I can't have monopolies and duopolies come in and tell me today your price is going up 6x after I've invested 20 years in the ecosystem and I'm dependent on it. And so these are the drivers we're seeing today that are causing a psychological change in mindset, not even at the company level, but at the country level.
Is this something you are aware of before you joined Tenstorrent? I mean, this is like unexpected turn of events for me as a mere technology business writer, actually.
Yeah, I've been seeing it come for a while. I'm good at some things and I'm very bad at some things. I tell my team this all the time. I am pretty good at looking into the future, seeing trends, seeing puzzle pieces, pulling it together. And like I talked about earlier, turning disruption and changing trends into a competitive benefit for the company I work at versus a risk, a liability, a downside, right?
Yeah.
And so I did see a lot of this coming. We've seen a lot of the things happening with chiplets. We've seen the slowing Moore's law. And if you respond to it with courage, confidence, and conviction early, it turns into an advantage. But there's a lot of companies who just want to cling to the high margins and the profit they have now and don't want to make that change. And it's a problem. I mean, if Steve Jobs would have listened to his iPod general manager, he never would have made the iPhone because it completely destroyed the iPod business, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But you have to go in and look at the future like Steve Jobs did and said, the world isn't going to use iPods anymore. The world is going to use this thing I've envisioned called iPhone. And I don't care what has to be decimated and murdered and changed to make that happen. We're going to go in that direction, right? And so that's what I think people are doing, and countries are seeing it now. They're saying, I'm not going to allow myself to be put in that situation. We got to get proactive, and we need to do business differently. And Tenstorrent's there to do that business with these countries and companies, and that's why Japan is calling on us to help them create this new dynamic that allows them to be safe and secure and successful in the global market.
Yeah, exactly. So you guys continue to amaze me. So thanks for coming to the show, and we will have plenty more to learn. But please come back to the show again. All right. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks for having me, Junko. It was a pleasure to be here.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks for tuning in to our latest chat with Junko and Bola. Register at www.ojo-yoshida-report.com and you will have free access for your first 2 months to in-depth news and analysis that you can't find anywhere else.